Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So for today I'm going to use a honeybee stencil called Snowfall, and for the first tag I'm going to use the Distress texture paste in matte finish, and I've got some mixed media cardstock that I have used the Tag and Bookplate Bigz die from forever ago. It's also a Tim Holtz Alterations die, and I've cut out the tag to use for today's project. So I'm lining up the stencil where I want it on my tag and then just taping it at the back. That's just to hold it in place. It doesn't you don't have to do this, but I just figure it's easier when you're messing around with pastes and things. And then I've got a couple of different spatulas. I wasn't sure which one I was going to use for this, and I'm just going to grab a bit of the texture paste and add it straight onto over the stencil to get it, and kind of pushing it, but not very not very hard, but pushing it into the stencil, and then just making sure that I've covered everything, where I want that stencil. I want full coverage for this one, rather than sort of little bits of it here and there, which is a great look, but I wanted to completely cover this because I want to show you 5 different ways that you can use a stencil. Now obviously this is more Christmas themed because it's got snowflakes on it, or winter themed I guess, but you could do this with any stencil. So for the second one I'm doing the same thing to prep the stencil and the tag, and this time I'm using Aquamarine Nuvo embellishment mousse. Now this is a little bit thicker. I probably need to add a bit of distilled water. Make sure it's distilled water, because you don't know what chemicals are in sort of regular tap water. But I added a little bit of that. Maybe I need to add a bit more because it's quite dry. But I just sort of worked it into the stencil, again the same way I did with the previous one, until it was covered where I wanted it covered. And each time I've done this, I've gone off and cleaned the spatula and the stencil very quickly. If you were just doing a project and you only needed to do one tag or one bit of stenciling like this with one type of product, then you could just have a bowl of warm soapy water next to you and just chuck it in there. Or if you're using different stencils, and that way you don't have to keep running to the bathroom or wherever you wash them up to get that done. So for this one I'm just cleaning up the edges of the there was a bit of like over stenciling. So with this one as well, I noticed that when I stenciled it seemed to leak underneath a little bit because of the moisture. So I tried adding some water to it after I'd washed my stencil, but by then it had dried off enough that it wasn't going to move. But these embellishment mousses are nice because you can use them, water them down and use them as paints. So you can thin them out that way, which is quite nice. So for the third one, again, I'm just prepping and putting the stencil, taping it to the back of the tag. And then this time I'm going to use some Nuvo Glimmer paste, and this is very sparkly. This is the Silver Gem colour, and it's super sparkly stuff. So again, I'm just going to grab a bit of this. This is much more liquidy than the last two, and so again, you don't need very much. If you're not mixing and adding to anything that's going to react with colour, you can just scrape the excess off and just keep going. If you know you've got something that's going to react again with the moisture from your paste, and like distressings will react with moisture, then I would suggest just leaving it off to the side rather than putting it back in your jar. But that's the sparkly one. And then there was a bit on the sort of more solid area of the snowflake that I just filled in. I might not have been able to do that if it was one of the little like spiky bits. So for the next one, same thing again, just prepping it. And for this one, I'm going to do some heat embossing, I believe. Yes. So for this one, I'm going to grab a Versamark ink, which is a clear sticky ink, and I've got a embossing glaze in Speckled Egg. This is a distress glaze, and you could easily do this with a regular embossing powder, but I'm using the embossing glaze. If I had stamped something behind or on the tag first and then done this, it would have then, you could still, because it's a glaze, you would still see that through the colour of, you know, of the stenciled part, which I probably could have done that as well to show you. So maybe I'll do that on another project. But that's the joy of a glaze, whereas embossing powders tend to be more of a solid colour, so you're not necessarily going to see through them as such. So now I've put that on there, I'm just going to heat with my heat tool, heat the embossing powder up. Now I generally go from the back of the card to heat until my heat tool's warmed up as well, and then I will start to do it across the front. I do a combination of both just because I do find that I get better results if I heat from the back, but it is slower. So there's that. So but I get less of the, like, the bits of embossing powders flicking everywhere, so it's a little less frustrating. So on this one, I'm going to use this is the basics of a stencil, is using some ink. I've got Coastal Cabana Stampin' Up! Ink, and again I am just going to, well, not again, I'm going to just use this the way that you would normally use a stencil, and just ink through the stencil. I will do something in a minute which, if I'd used a distress ink, because it stays wet for longer, it may have worked better, but I actually still like the result. But we'll get to that in a minute. So I'm just doing some basic stenciling with some ink. This is the easiest way to use your stencils. You know, if you don't have any pastes, or you don't want to get, you know, don't want to do anything with paste, any of the pastes I've showed you, just do ink. Ink works beautifully. So while this was still, well, while I was thinking maybe the ink would be wet enough, so I grabbed some Cosmic Shimmer Sparkle embossing powder and just chucked it over the top really quickly, to see whether any of it would stick to the ink. Now, like I say, if this was a like a distress ink where the ink will stay wet for longer, or a pigment ink, then yes, it probably would have stuck better. But actually what happened was some of those particles moved, and it kind of looks a bit like dewdrops on there, like really tiny dewdrops. So some areas it caught enough of that embossing powder and stuck, and some areas not so much, but but it still looked really pretty, and the sparkle on it is still sort of there and pretty. So I thought, why not? We'll just try it. So that was on a whim. That wasn't that wasn't the original plan for that. So then, of course, I needed more layers on here. So if you like, the first part has been the first layer of this. The next bit, I'm using some Resist spray from Tim Holtz and Ranger, and this is everywhere that this Resist spray is, and when it dries, anything else you put on top of that, it will resist. So unless it's like concrete or something, do you know what I mean? Like any of the inks and things, it will resist them, and I'll just show you that in a minute. So just cleaning off the nozzle, it's a good tip anyway, just so it doesn't get clogged. It helps a bit. So I don't know whether whether you can actually dry resist spray. So I very quickly ran my this is the heated tool over the top to try and dry that resist spray. I just kind of wanted to get on with it with the project. So I don't know if you should do that or not, but I did, and it was fine. I moved the heat tool quite quickly. I know this is sped up, but I still moved it quite quickly. And then I just touched it to see whether it was still tacky, because it's got like a weird texture, but it's, I just, you know, until I was happy that it was dry enough. So for the first one, this is the one we inked with the Coastal Cabana ink. I am using the same Coastal Cabana ink and I'm inking over the top of it. And this way you'll see when we use a paper towel to rub off the excess ink that is sitting on top of any embossed areas, because we actually embossed some of this, and the resist spray, it will then show up. So I will show these properly at the end, but you can see the resist spray a little bit coming out there, which is one of the cool effects of this technique. So just cleaning out my mat, and this is the Waffle Flower Media mat, by the way. And then this is the glaze, the Distress Glaze and Speckled Egg. So I decided to grab a Speckled Egg Distress ink, and I will do the same thing. I will ink over the top of it, and with these are makeup brushes, but you know, with a blending brush. And again, I'm just going to go over the whole thing and see what happens when I then use paper towel to rub off the excess that will be sitting on top of not only the Distress Glaze that we've got there, but also the resist spray. And then of course, because it's distress ink, it's still going to react again, so I sprayed both of them just to see if the Stampin' Up one would react as well, but I think the ink had dried too much at that point. But the other one, we got nice texture, more layers of texture, like visual texture. So this one is the Embellishment Mousse from Nuvo. So I've got some seasonal silver Cosmic Shimmer powder, pigment powder from forever ago, probably 10 plus years. And I have it in this little like spray bottle thing that I got in Poundland. And it unfortunately blocked while I was doing this, but I then grabbed the powder itself and I will try and add some of that to it. I also used some Bombay ink in white and then some Perfect Pearls in Perfect Pearl in the pearl color, and just I wanted some extra something else in the background, but I really needed that like the white and the pearl color are too pale for what I wanted, which is why I chose the seasonal silver, because it's almost got like an iridescent purple that sort of highlights. So because again I dried this off and I still wasn't totally happy with the color, I decided to grab the pigment powder itself and a paintbrush and add some water, and I will add this just to my mat here with a dry brush, and then I will use a paintbrush just to try and add that to it. This is not my favorite one, but I do still love the color in the background, and it's one of those things that when it hits the light, it's so pretty. So it wasn't the best one. It wasn't the simplest one because I had to faff with this bit because my spray nozzle got stuck. But this is one way that you could do it even if you don't have spray bottles. You could do it this way and just add bits of water. So I'm trying to get it to sort of drip down the tag. And this is an old technique, so this is not a new thing. So anybody can, you know, this is like years and years old. And then just picking up any of the leftovers and then trying to get that on there. Now it looks, this is the weird thing about this color, which is probably why I like it. It looks kind of grey and dirty at this point. But when it hits the light, it just has this incredible, like I say, this purpley lavender sort of color that comes out. So I'm trying to get the color here for you so you can sort of see it. I'll try and show it better later on in the video. But it just has this incredible purpley shimmer that comes out. It's just fab. And I decided to ink this one as well with the Speckled Egg ink, and just decided to go over the top. I had this sort of pale blue, white, silver kind of color scheme going on, so anything that kind of tied in with that was great. I will add something else at the end though. And then this way, by adding the ink on the top, you can see how the resist spray suddenly pops up and just suddenly it's there. And that's what I was trying to achieve earlier, but yeah, sometimes you've got to go back to your distress inks. Now, this is one of the last two are two of my favorites. This one in particular. So first of all, I'm going to spray with water over the top quite a lot. Then I'm going to add some Pixie powder in Peacock green, which is more on the green side, but there is an incredible blue that comes out like peacock feathers, hence the name. And then I'm going to spray some more water over the top, and it just is so awesome. So if you've never played with the pigment powders in this sort of way of playing with them, you really should. It is such a cool technique, and it's quick. And if I had more time and I wasn't making 5 tags for a video, the leftover juice, if you like, that was on my mat, I would have actually grabbed another piece of cardstock or tag or something and just mopped it up with that, and just what you get is what you get, you know what I mean? So but yeah, time and all that. So, but look at that, it's so pretty. And then just very carefully, because obviously there's tons of glitter in that glimmer paste, I just carefully went over the areas that had the resist spray, and it's just so cool. So this is the texture paste one. So this one I'm going to use some Pixie powder in pearl, white pearl, and then a turquoise Brusho. So this one actually was too blue. It's very blue. It's not quite how I imagined, but this is magic. It looks like there's nothing on there, or pretty much nothing. But wait for it. Isn't that the coolest thing ever? And I don't forget I've got them, because I've got a drawer full of stuff like this, but I just love it. And everywhere, the nice thing about the distressed texture pastes and that is that they take on the color that you've got there, so you don't need a million colors of them. You need one. You need a white base, which is what you've got with the distress texture paste, and then you add whatever color you like. Now, I added probably a little too much water, so I lost a lot of the shimmeriness of it, because the blue was too intense for what I wanted these tags to kind of look like. I wanted that sort of wintry, icy kind of look, which I know some of them don't totally look like that, but this one was just a little too intense blue. But I put hardly any powder on there, and it's so incredible. So if you can get hold of Brushos, they are fab. They are a highly pigmented powder. There's no like shimmer in them or anything like that, which is why I added the pearl, just to add a bit of shimmer to it. But you obviously don't need to do that if you don't have the shimmer. If you want the shimmer, again, I could have mopped this up with another piece of cardstock. If you want tons of this shimmeriness, then use the pearls. Nuvo have some, and Cosmic Shimmer, probably my 2 favorites for those. But yeah, it still turned out really cool, and the resist again comes out really nicely. So what I decided to do with all of them was to add some vintage photo. What is Christmas or Halloween without some sort of vintage thing going on? And blue and brown go together really well. So for me, all these sort of icy, bluey colours, I thought the vintage photo would be perfect. Brush corduroy is my all-time favourite, I think. Maybe. But vintage photo, there is something in the tone of the brown that makes it vintage, I guess. So for all of them, I'm going to ink the edges, but for this one I still felt like those snowflakes just weren't quite popping enough, so I tried to use the Picket Fence Distress Crayon over the top just to try and highlight them a bit more, but it wasn't really working. You don't really know, it's not too sort of obvious. Maybe a bit more close up, but not in this sense. So maybe I should have done that before and kind of use it as a resist before I sprayed over the top. That probably would have worked better, but I still love it. And then just using my distress vintage photo with a blending tool and the foam, which is falling apart as we speak, so I probably need to get some new ones of those, but just using that over the top and around the edges. Sorry. What you could also do is add sort of use that lightly over the top of your like raised stencil areas. So like especially on this blue one, I could have actually added the ink over the top and it would have highlighted them even more, but I was just going around the edges, trying to get these sort of finished. When I had done them, I wasn't sure if I was going to put anything on them, and then in the end I decided that actually this is just a nice example for either you could make them into tags you're actually going to use for presents or whatever you want. You can stick it on the front of a card and make it into like part of the card, if you know what I mean. And what I decided I'd use them for is to just put them on a book ring, have them as sort of like samples of what I could do with a stencil. So and then on the back of them you could even write what product you've used, how you've used it, you know, that sort of thing, so that you know for next time if you like what that looks like and you want to create it onto a card base, you could then recreate that as best, you know, with different colors. So obviously this is a Snowfall stencil and we're thinking Christmas and Christmassy colors and all that, but they don't have to be for that time of year. You could use any stencil, you could use the same products, and it will look completely different. So here's a close-up of the Coastal Cabana Stampin' Up! Ink one, and we embossed with some Cosmic Shimmer over the top. This is the Distress Glaze in Speckled Egg. So just to try and slow it down so you can hopefully see what I can see in real life. Hopefully it's coming across. And then I think at this point my cat was trying to come over and say hello. Oh no, he's drinking my water, that's what he was. He always sticks his head in there. Anyway, and this is the Cosmic Shimmer that was in the Peacock green, I think it was. And it's just so pretty, so pretty. But more green than icy blue. So, and then this was the Embellishment Mousse one. Again, very subtle but very pretty. And sort of dimensional but not, if you know what I mean. And then this was the Distress texture paste. So even where that splatter from the Distress resist spray went over the snowflakes, that's still resisted, but you've still got the dimension of the snowflake. Very cool. So I hope you've enjoyed this, guys. I hope this gives you some ideas on maybe making some samples for yourself and writing the notes on the back of them. Tags are a good way to do this. I'm suddenly obsessed with tags, so that's my new thing. And I will see you next time, guys. Bye for now.